Hello everyone, and welcome to the Sorcerer class version. Before we get into it though, the Sorcerer has always had a really cool core feature of meta magic, being able to kind of, create, spells utilizing sorcery points, and then also being able to utilize those same sorcery points to be able to then kind of alter and adjust and change and just manipulate spells in a really cool, awesome way. That about the Sorcerer has always been super cool. However, that's kind of where it stops in terms of the core features. Literally, the core Sorcerer features are spellcasting, which doesn't really count. And then you have Font of Magic, which essentially is where you get your sorcery points and you can do the conversions, so you can create spells and stuff. Okay, cool, whatever. Right? Third level, Meta Magic. This is from 2014. Just 2014. Meta Magic. And then, so that's two features. And then you look at the rest of it. Oh, and you get an additional Meta Magic feature, which basically gives you more options, so that's not an actual option. So if you count them here, you have 1, 2, 20th level feature is 3. 3 class features. Which that sucks. That's just, no. That is one of the big reasons why I'm doing this. And I think that the spellcasters are where I really had to do a lot of the heavy lifting, because there was just still so many gaps. There's so many gaps in 2014, and then reading the Unearthed Arcana, you see that they add a couple cool things, which not knocking them for that, but there's still a bunch of gaps in between the class. And so that is why today you will see what I've adjusted. I mean, the Unearthed Arcana, like I mentioned, has added various abilities that are pretty cool, but there have been some things that I had to tweak, for some of those abilities, especially with how the class progresses and builds out. But taking basically what the 2014, the very bare bones that they had, utilizing the Unearthed Arcana, and then using my brain, I then built out a super cool sorcerer that progresses, throughout, from levels 1 to 20, in ways that gives it the overall class more of an identity, kind of being this innate spellcaster, channeling that, kind of developing that throughout the class. You'll see as we kind of go through it, and I think now it's just in a much better spot. It feels like it has a lot more flavor than just, oh, you can manipulate spells, which is cool, but that being it kind of sucks. So without further ado, let's jump in. Okay, so above me you're gonna have the UA. To my side here you're gonna have my version, my Sorcerer, and then you could already tell that I'm over here using the 2014 player handbook as well. So let's go ahead and get into it. First of all, if you have a 2014 player handbook, you can tell that this bar here, this table here, is already much better, much more filled than the 2014 version. And so here you have all of your different things: sorcerer's points, etc., spells. Hit points are going to be the same. Proficiencies, saving throws are going to be adjusted, because I also felt like the sorcerer can have some cool versatility and variability. And so the saving throws are now Constitution and your selected spellcasting ability. And I'll get to that in a little bit. Skills are going to be any 2 skills of your choice, which, honestly, I changed from this. There was Arcana, Deception, Insight, Intimidation, Persuasion, Religion. And those were mainly given because of the fact that the Sorcerer was a charisma-based caster. And I have changed that, and I'll kind of get into that a little bit shortly. But you can choose any 2 skills of your choice. Tools are going to be none, armors are going to be none, weapons are going to be simple weapons. The equipment is going to be how the UA had it, where you can either choose the equipment that they give you listed, or you can spend the money allocated instead. Alright, let's go and jump into this. First things first, one thing that I don't understand why Wizards of the Coast has done is they have streamlined that every single class got their subclass at 3rd level, which doesn't make any sense. I can understand, because the reasoning was because they wanted each class to progress in similarly, in the sense that all the players are getting their subclass at the same time, so it feels a little bit more even. But I don't think that matters. I think that ultimately the flavor of the class is kind of more important, and I think that certain classes, like the Cleric, for instance, definitely should have its subclass at 1st level. So they had it at 3rd in the UA. I was like, nope, and so I shunted it back down to 1st. And so that's what you'll see here is that the first level you do get your sorcerer subclass. Level 1 is going to be spellcasting, which I will not read because that is a lot of words. However, I will read a couple different pieces here towards the bottom, which is spellcasting ability selection. You can choose between intelligence, wisdom, or charisma to be your spellcasting ability. Once you've made this selection, it cannot be changed. Ever. Alright. And then spell save DCs are going to be based on that option, that selection you made, as well as the spell attack modifier. As well as that secondary saving throw that you would get at level 1 as well. So if you want to be an intelligence-based sorcerer, then you're an intelligence-based sorcerer. Etc., etc. for the other multiple, for wisdom and charisma. I think that just makes sense. I think if you're going to be a naturally kind of gifted spellcaster, then I think that you should have some kind of option in order to choose what your character then is kind of like, what road they go down with that. Are they utilizing magic? Do they become more of an intellectual? Or utilizing magic, do they become more like wise and kind of understanding of the world and of people and all this different stuff? Or is it like charisma, like it has been before, where it's like you're channeling it through just interacting with people and then and utilizing that kind of charismatic focus to do that. So I just think that it's a really cool option. I think that it makes sense for the sorcerer to be able to have that flavor that you can choose between. And so that is one of the biggest kind of adjustments that I made early on, is the fact that you can make that choice. And I think it opens up sorcerer to be pretty pretty versatile in other ways. You don't necessarily have to now choose a wizard to be a spellcaster that relies on intelligence. And you don't have to choose the cleric to be one that relies on wisdom. So I think that the sorcerer now can be kind of this multifaceted spellcaster that can fill in a certain role and kind of stand alone in that way. So, all right, enough of that. Level 2, Font of Magic. You can tap into the wellspring of magic within yourself. This wellspring is represented by sorcery points, which allow you to create a variety of magical effects. You have 2 sorcerer points, and you gain more as you reach higher levels, as shown in the sorcery points column of the sorcerer table. You can never have more sorcery points than the number shown on the table for your level. You're getting all spent sorcery points when you finish a long rest. You can use your sorcery points to fuel the options below, along with other features such as meta magic that use those points. Converting spell slots to sorcery points. You can expend a spell slot to gain a number of sorcery points equal to the spell's level. No action required. Creating spell slots. As a bonus action, you can transform unexpended sorcery points into 1 spell slot. The creating spell slots table shows the cost of creating a spell slot of a given level, and it lists the minimum sorcerer level you must be able to create a slot. You can create a spell slot no higher in level than 5. Any spell slot you create with this feature vanishes when you finish a long rest. Alright. As you can see here, it is unchanged, which is, it's also unchanged from, well, there is now like an additional portion of the table where it says minimum sorcerer level kind of required to do it, which, isn't necessarily that big of a difference from the 2014, only because it basically just puts it in line of when you would get those level spells anyway. At 3rd level, you're getting 2nd level spells. At 5th, you're getting 3rd. So it just kind of makes it a little bit more concise with that. So, but Font of Magic is essentially unchanged. Meta Magic, level 3. Because your magic flows from within you, you can alter your spells to suit your needs. You gain 3 meta magic options of your choice from the meta magic options section listed at the end of this class's description. You gain 3 more when you become a level 10 sorcerer and 3 more when you become a level 17 sorcerer. You can use only one meta magic option on a spell when you cast it, unless otherwise noted in one of those options. Whenever you gain a sorcerer level, you can replace one of your meta magic options with one you do not know. So, biggest change for this is that I made it so that you get 3 now per feature for this. So at 2nd level you get, or 3rd level you get 3. Oh, okay. Sorry, that something threw me off because I had meta magic at 3rd level and then I saw in the UA that they had it at 2nd level, but that's because they shifted things around because they wanted to try to make the sorcerer subclass at 3rd. So unrelated. Anyway, that threw my brain completely off track there. So anyway, back to what I was saying. Essentially now you get 3 meta magic options at each iteration. So at 3rd level you get 3, at 10th level you get 3, and at 17th level you get 3 for a total of 9 instead of only having a total of 6. Giving you basically more options, which is big reason, kind of the biggest reason why I'm doing a lot of these class overhauls is for more options, is for more access, more fun. So that's basically the only change there. However, one more thing to note here, and I'll go ahead and cover it at the end of going through all the features, but I did actually add some additional meta magic options because I gave you more access to them. So now because you have 9 at the end of the class instead of just 6, I was like, well, there needs to kind of be an offset to that. So I wanted to definitely, kind of play into that a little bit more, giving you a wider array of options. And then not only that, but I think the meta magic options they're all super cool. They're all super, there's a lot of fun ways you can utilize them. Though I will say, the one thing I didn't like about the meta magic options was that there was none that really felt to be like later back half D&D kind of focused. And so a lot of the ones that I added are a lot higher of a sorcery point cost. But it's intended to be more of like late game sorcerer, like at 10th or 17th level. You're choosing those ones because now you have a lot more access to a lot more points in your resource pool, and so that's kind of what I added in to make it more feel like that there is now some more costier. Or more costly. There's more costly options that are more kind of geared towards higher tiers of play, essentially. So. Moving on, you have level 4 is going to be the ability score improvement. At level 5, you're going to have Sorceress Restoration. When you roll initiative or finish a short rest and have no sorcery points remaining, you gain a number of those points equal to half your sorcerer level, rounded up. Once you use this feature, you can't do so again until you finish a long rest. That is going to be the same as here, except for they had it so you gain a number of those points equal to your sorcerer level divided by 5. Round down. I'm like, dude, no one wants to do that math. So I just made it real easy and just half your sorcerer level rounded up. Cool. Also, just as a quick note, the 20th level capstone for 2014 version was at 20th level you regain 4 expended sorcerer points whenever you finish a short rest. That was the capstone back in the day. So good to know that it's much better now, and then it's also at 5th level. So there you go. Moving on, 6th level is going to be your subclass feature. Level 7 is going to be the Arcane Surge. You tap into the well of innate arcane power that flows through you. As a bonus action, you can cause that magic to surge forth and empower you for 1 minute, during which you gain the following benefits. The spell save DC of your sorcerer spells increases by 1, and you have advantage on attack rolls of sorcerer spells you cast. You can use this feature twice, and you regain all expended uses of it when you finish a long rest. I really, really like this feature. This feature is super cool. I will say, though, that I took it from the UA. However, the UA had it at 1st level, which is... I think they did that because they had shifted the Sorcerer subclass to 3rd, so they wanted to fill in 1st with something. Though, I just think that this is an incredibly powerful feature, and so I do think that you should have to work into the class a bit before you just get access to this. And so... I have it here at 7th level, but I do like this kind of... I've seen it and heard it mentioned as like a sorcerer's kind of rage. I like that. I like that kind of flavor of it, or the overloading and expenditure of the magical innate power you have. Super cool, and then if the DM flavors it well, it can be makes them for some really cool moments. So, level 8 is gonna be the ability score improvement. Same as before. Level 9 is gonna be Arcane Sensitivity. This is a homebrewed feature here. The magic that exists within you can be channeled to help identify and distinguish the magic and arcana that flows in the world around you. You gain proficiency in the arcana skill. If you are already proficient in arcana, you instead gain expertise in it. Additionally, you always have the detect magic and identify spells prepared and can cast either one a number of times equal to your spellcasting ability modifier without requiring material components and without expending a spell slot. You gain all expended use of this feature after you finish a long rest. I really like this feature because I think it really plays into the core identity of what the sorcerer should be, in the sense of like you have all this power flowing through you. You're basically attuned to magic, and I think now at this point, as you're getting towards the later half or the later portions of the front half of your class, I think it's kind of cool that it comes out in this ability for you to be able to almost interact and manipulate and understand magical properties and magical features, and just that being an innate kind of ability, I just think is super cool. I think it's almost like now that your body and this kind of power that's channeled within you has been within you for so long that now it's starting to kind of unlock other abilities for you to be able to read magic and understand it. So I think that just really kind of ties into the overall identity of the class pretty cool and pretty well. So level 10 to be more meta magic. You now gain 3 more meta magic options of your choice for a total of 6. Sorcery Incarnate. While your Arcane Surge feature is active, you can use up to 2 of your meta magic options on each spell you cast. In addition, if you have no uses of Arcane Surge left, you can use it if you spend 4 sorcery points when you take the bonus action to activate it. That is going to be pretty similar here to the 7th level feature. However, it's obviously in the later half because I have shifted things around as I've shown you. But I think it's a cool feature. The fact that now you can use 2 meta magic options, now that you can kind of you can just overcharge these spells, I think is actually pretty sweet. You know, in that kind of that rage and that kind of over expenditure of your arcane ability with the Arcane Surge, I think that's super cool. And then of course being able to now get it back for a sorcery point cost is pretty dope. Though they had it at 2 in the UA, and I thought that was very cheap for the fact that not only now can you use 2 meta magic options, but you can also you also get, you know, a higher spell save DC and advantage, and advantage on attack rolls. So I just think that it should cost a bit more. But also, it's 1 minute without concentration for Arcane Surge. That's crazy. That's so good. So I think 4 points is more than reasonable. 12th level is going to be ability score improvement. 13th level is going to be another Homebrewed, which is going to be Bewildering Detonation. You can channel the powerful magic that dwells within you to explode outward, inflicting damage and ailments to those that shouldn't have gotten too close. As an action, you can expend a spell slot and fuel an explosive release of arcane energy within a 5-foot radius centered on yourself. The damage type is your choice of cold, fire, force, lightning, or thunder. The following table outlines the damage and effect options per spell slot level. So I'm not going to go necessarily read through all of this, but you can see that it does kind of adjust as you feel it with higher spells. And so the damage increases, and then the effect options that you can choose also increase as you go higher. So you can either push them, or you can then choose from blind, deafened, or pushed. And then the pushing obviously is farther, or you can do blind, deafened, dazed, and pushed. And then eventually you can get up to, instead of dazed, stunned, or pushed 20 feet. So it's just, you know, as you increase the amount of expenditure and amount of energy you feel into it, the more you can do with it. So a creature must make a Constitution saving throw equal to your spell save DC or take the full damage and suffer from the selected effect. If the creature makes the save, they only take half damage and resist the selected effect. If the selected effect imposes a condition, it lasts for 1 minute. An affected creature can make another Constitution saving throw at the end of each of its turns, ending the condition on a successful save. I just really like this idea of the Sorcerer being able to tap into this magical ability in order to almost channel it in some sort of reactive kind of defensive manner. I think that, you know, the Sorcerer not being a frontliner, especially, you know, they are a little bit squishier. They only have a D6 in terms of their hit dice. And so I do think that it makes sense that the Sorcerer would be able to kind of channel this almost defensive magic, this defensive effect that they would be able to do if they were to, say, get overwhelmed or get, you know, pressed. Or get too much pressure put on them. So I just think that that's just a fun mechanic. Because, I mean, it's within a 5-foot radius. So, I mean, you can either beeline it up and do this. But my intention for it is to be a lot more of like a, hey, say that you're just causing a lot of damage in a combat encounter. And now the enemies are starting to target you. And, you know, say that, you know, like a lot of these melee focused combatants are coming up on you. Now you kind of have an ability to create some breathing room for yourself. And so I think that was kind of the inspiration for it, and I think it could be flavored really cool, and if the DM explains it well, I think it'd be super solid. So all right, level 14 is going to be a subclass feature. Level 15 is going to be no class feature, and I have highlighted this in other videos, but essentially if you're a half caster or a full caster, there is going to be one gap in terms of the progression of the class, so that way marshals have a little bit more of an edge in terms of the amount of class features that they have, and to kind of give them a little bit of a boost there. However, I mean, at this gap at 15th level, you are getting an additional spell prepared. You are getting access to your 7th level slot, so there are things that you're gaining, and so it's not truly like a gap necessarily, but it's just in the features kind of progression. So 16th level is going to be your ability score improvement. 17th level is going to be more meta magic options. This is going to be where now you have access to 3 more, which is a total of 9. And then 18th level is going to be your subclass feature. 19th level is going to be your ability score improvement. And 20th level is going to be the Arcane Apotheosis, which is going to be similar. It's going to be similar to the, or to take some inspiration from the one that the UA had. But here we go. The innate magical powers that resides within you has grown to an immense power. You gain the following benefits. Innate manipulation. While your arcane surge feature is active, you can use one meta magic option on each of your turns without spending sorcerer points on it, as long as the cost of the meta magic is 2 or less. So super good. You basically can now just manipulate your spells for free as long as it costs 2 or less. And I will say the majority of them do cost 2 or less, but I did add this stipulation because I have added some very good, more costly, like I mentioned before, more costly options. And so I wanted to make sure that it was still, this feature wasn't going to get out of hand with just be able to spam some of these really good kind of upper tier meta magics. So that's the reason for that. And then warding body. Your body having been suffused with arcane energy for so long is now able to ward off premeditated damage types. After you finish a long rest, choose 2 damage types from the following list: acid, cold, fire, force, lightning, or thunder. You gain resistance to the chosen damage types until the end of your next long rest, at which point you can choose the same types or 2 new ones. I really like this idea that your body having been suffused, being filled with this innate magical, energy, has gotten to the point where now you can basically channel that to be defensive towards certain elemental types and magic types. And so I think that's just a super cool thing for them now to be able to have resistance to those selected types. And you can have that flexibility to choose them. I wanted you to be able to kind of shift what your body is being, is defensive to, and just that kind of plays into the flavor a little bit more as well. So super cool there. So yeah, that is a 20th level capstone. And honestly, from start to finish, I do think now that the Sorcerer is very powerful. The meta magic is a super good tool that they have, and so I really wanted to make sure that I didn't add too many insane features to an already full caster that has a pretty good that has a lot of options, but I wanted to add kind of more flavored, more core identity kind of based features as well. And so yes, but then I'm going moving on here. We will go ahead and go into some of the meta magic options that I have added as well, and we won't get into all of them. I won't read all of them. You can go and definitely look at the file yourself and check them out. The other ones, the biggest differences from the 2014 is that they made twin spelled function a little differently, and then I basically adjusted some of the costs for some of the other meta magic options. But that's other than that, they're pretty much relatively unchanged. But let's go ahead and read off a couple, or actually all the new ones that I added. So one of them that I added is going to be Amplified Spell. And so costing 6 sorcery points, when you cast a spell that forces a creature or creatures to make a saving throw to resist the spell's effect, you can spend 6 sorcery points to increase the DC of that spell by 2. Pretty freaking good, if you ask me. Moving on, Devastating Spell. Its cost is going to be 3 to 5 sorcery points. Hold on. Before I jump on there, I will say I wanted to give a little more of an explanation. Amplified Spell, I wanted this ability. I wanted you to be able to have as a sorcerer, because a lot of your damage, a lot of your tools come from spells, and so I wanted you to be able to kind of have more of an involvement in terms of making certain spells that you really need to go through in a certain high risk moment. Have those options to do that, and so I know there is already a heightened spell where you can give a creature disadvantage, but I wanted you to kind of pooling together certain things or having different options to be able to give that threshold of making certain spells go through a little bit higher. So that's the reason for Amplified Spell. Devastating Spell is 3 to 5 sorcery points. When you hit a creature with a spell attack, you can spend a designated amount of sorcery points to cause the spell to deal 3 additional damage dice to the target. If the damage die for the spell is d4s, you spend 3 sorcery points. If the damage die for the spell is either d6s or d8s, you spend 4 sorcery points. The damage die for the spell is either d10s or d12s, you spend 5 sorcery points. The reason behind this one is I really wanted you to be able to kind of overcharge your spells in certain instances, so that way you could be able to, hopefully in a crucial moment be able to deal a little bit more damage and maybe kill off a creature, or just kind of focus that energy in order to just be able to bump your spells a little bit in damage and kind of be able to target certain threats and be able to take them out with a little more efficiency. I wanted to give you that option, but you can see that it is a little bit more costly in terms of what you'd be putting in for it. And the reason why I did the different cost amount was because, as obviously if you're adding 3 additional damage die, depending on the damage die of the spell, it's going to affect the amount of damage that you'd be able to tack on by rolling those 3 additional dice. And so that's why I wanted to make it so that there were thresholds for, you know, D4s all the way to D12s. To adjust for the fact that a D12, rolling 3 more D12s is obviously going to cause more damage than rolling 3 more D4s. So that's why I did that. All right, moving on to Piercing Spell. This one's actually pretty cool. It costs me 2 to 5 sorcery points. If you cast a spell against a creature that is behind cover, you can spend 2 sorcery points. Sorcery point. LOL. Sorcery points to reduce the creature's cover bonus by 1 level. So 3/4 to 1/2 or 1/2 to none. You can spend 3 sorcery points to reduce the creature's cover bonus by 2 levels. So 3/4 to none. You can spend 5 sorcery points to cause the spell to pierce through total cover. However, disadvantages of not being able to see the target still apply. I think that this will allow the sorcerer to now... I wanted the sorcerer to be able to have options in case there were creatures behind cover. Because if a creature's behind cover, that can make a lot of things a little bit more precarious. That can make the overall effectiveness of the sorcerer, you know, drop pretty significantly. And so I wanted there to be some options to be able to overcome those obstacles. I haven't play tested this... the piercing spell in terms of piercing through total cover, and so I'd be very curious what your y'all's feedback would be on this, and then, you know, if you decide to run it, maybe how it functions in a game, because I feel like it's obviously really good, but I don't know if it's like really good, but they're, you know, it's still within a reasonable power threshold, or if it's just like breaking certain confines for things, and so I'd be curious as to how this will play out in the future. So. But I do have it there. I think that you can balance it pretty well as a DM, considering that I made sure to add the fact that disadvantages of not being able to actually see the targets would still apply. So that's where you can, as a DM, kind of impose certain things to make it so where that spell goes through the cover, but doesn't have necessarily the same desired effect that the caster is hoping for. So some wiggle room there for sure. Some flexibility. And then Siege Spell is going to be 3 sorcery points. When you cast a spell, you can spend 3 sorcery points to give the spell the Siege property. Any damage that is dealt by the spell is now doubled against objects and structures. I just think this would be a lot of fun to be able to blow things up. That's essentially what it boils down to. I think that if you need to blow some shit up, you now can do so with a Siege Spell. I think that opens up the sorcerer to be able to kind of manipulate and interact with terrain a little bit more freely with that ability. So yes, sir. And then Twinned Spells is going to be 3 sorcery points, and like I mentioned before, instead of being able to you can now before you could basically cast you could target a second creature in range with the same spell. So essentially, in certain scenarios, you could basically essentially cast a leveled spell twice. They adjusted it, so now Twin Spell is 3 sorcery points. When you cast a spell such as Charm Person or Hold Person, that can be cast with a higher level spell slot to target an additional creature. You can spend 3 sorcery points to increase the spell's effective level by 1. Additionally, if you cast a cantrip, you can spend... Oh, before I jump into that last portion, essentially, you can now upscale it to where instead of charming 1 person, you can charm 2 people, or however it functions. But instead of using the additional spell slot, you can use sorcery points to do that. I did, however, make it so that additionally, if you cast a cantrip, you can spend 3 sorcery points to duplicate the spell's effects. Effectively having cast the same cantrip twice. I mean, cantrips, obviously, they do progress in damage. I understand that. But I think that cantrips are pretty minor, pretty low on the damage threshold or on the effects threshold that you can create. That I think that for 3 sorcery points, I think it's still within a realm of balance, and I don't think it'll generate too many issues or push anything to the point of broken. So, but you let me know. But yeah, that is going to be, so Amplified Spell, Devastating Spell, Piercing Spell, and then Siege Spell are all the ones that I have added in, increasing the pool of the meta magic options. So, whew, alright. That about sums it up for Sorcerer. Like I mentioned before, super good spot now. I think that these new features and new meta magic options are going to definitely make it so that the Sorcerer feels a little bit from start to finish a lot more versatile, a lot more, kind of rooted in a core identity, and it'll come out more as you play, not only in the front half, but in the back half. Because I feel like the front half of the Sorcerer was kind of where you got everything back in 2014. And so now that there's a lot of options and features sprinkled throughout, I think it's a lot more of a fun class to stick to. You don't necessarily need to multi-class to get you know, a wider range of benefits. Now you're getting them kind of just inherently within the Sorcerer. So if you want access to this PDF, feel more than free to check it out in the video's description. I have the link there to the Homebrew website, which if you don't know what the Homebrew website is, it is where I made this PDF. It's where you can basically make D&D styled documents. It's super cool and yeah, super fun, super pretty easy to use too. So check that out as well. And then lastly, if you have any feedback or you have anything, you know, constructive to say, feel more than free to leave that in the comments. I'd be very curious as to what you guys think as well. But yeah, that about sums it up for this video. So I'll see y'all in the next one.